Both Finnish and Swedish leadership confirmed over the weekend that their governments will seek NATO membership. Their respective parliaments are expected to discuss and approve the decision in the coming weeks. The move marks a stark departure from decades of neutrality for both countries. AP confirms that Sweden has not been a member of a military alliance since the Napoleonic Wars, while Finland has remained non-aligned since World War II.
The road to NATO membership for the two Nordic countries could prove difficult. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told State News today that Finland and Sweden should have no illusions that we will simply put up with it, and nor should Brussels, Washington, and other NATO capitals. Additionally, Turkish President Erdogan told reporters that his government is not favorable to NATO bids from Helsinki and Stockholm, indicating that Turkey could use its member status to veto the two countries' admittance.
Yeah, and that's probably likely. I mean, all 30 NATO countries have to agree to allow in new members. So Finland and Sweden can say that they want to join NATO all they want. If any of the countries of the other 30 countries block, then they won't be admitted into NATO. So it's highly likely that they're not going to be admitted into NATO. Turkey, in particular, I would think doesn't want to send. They don't want to go to war with Russia at the end of the day. That's, I think, what Turkey is really trying to avoid. They've been playing footsie with Russia for a long time now. And I don't even know if Turkey's still staying in NATO, and they do provide us the largest ground military force. But, I'm kind of wondering if Turkey really wants to stick around in the alliance. But as of now, they are still there. There's no real talk of them actually exiting NATO. It's just kind of they just behave a little funny, but they certainly have the ability to block. And if Russia, Finland, now Sweden, I don't know if Russia really, Sweden's not on Russia's border, but Finland certainly is. They share quite a large border with one another. So that could prove a problem for Russia if Finland is admitted into NATO. And if nuclear weapons were to be taken in, I don't know if Finland would agree to it, to house nukes up on the Russian border. I doubt that they would, but if they're a NATO country, you never know. I suppose anything's possible, and that's the problem. So that would be obviously a huge security issue for Russia. Obviously, Finland feels like they're having a huge security issue with Russia on their border as well, with the nukes that they've got. So, but it's interesting to see how this one plays out. I don't expect that they will be admitted. I do think that at least Turkey, if not a few more, will block the NATO admittance. And not only that, but it's kind of a slap in the face to Ukraine, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I agree with you that I don't think they actually will be admitted. I think the most interesting thing is that they want to be admitted now, which historically has not been their clear position. I mean, it speaks to this war was a very bad idea for Russia. Now they have everyone wanting to get in NATO, and we could have been clearer that Ukraine was not going to join NATO. Absolutely, NATO has itself made a lot of mistakes. So, what is its purpose for even existing, really, following the fall of the Cold War? And we were very evasive about whether a nation like Ukraine, which is not qualified to join, there was a kind of will they, won't they thing that antagonized Russia, that Putin was very clear about that he did not like. But that does not excuse what ends up being a pretty bad calculation, because now they're bogged down in this horrific war in Ukraine, and now more countries want to be involved in NATO, which is what happens when you do this kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, it'll be. NATO's never been tested, so we don't really know. There's definitely the idea that NATO works really well because it's never been tested. So people say, well, that's why it works, right? Because Russia's never committed an act of aggression against a NATO country. But we actually don't know what would happen if Russia did. I mean, we know theoretically what is supposed to happen, that all of the countries are supposed to come together and behave as if they themselves are at war, that they themselves have been invaded. But it's never been tested. I don't know if I put it past. If Finland were to join NATO, I guess maybe we would find out if Russia would actually test it and start to have acts of aggression against Finland. And then the other question is, would all of these other soldiers, this is why Turkey, I think, would block it. They then have to ask, are they willing to send their sons to go and defend Finland? Will their sons accept that? Will those mothers accept that their sons have been sent off to go and defend Finland or to defend Montenegro or all of these other countries that we've been adding into NATO? It's a really good question. When you've got 30 countries now in the alliance, are you willing to go and defend? It's not about defending your own country anymore. It's about defending somebody else's country as if it's your own. Are you really willing to do that?
Right, but yeah, you're right. But that would kind of be pretty interesting if their answer there was no. I mean, they entered the alliance, right? Because what if they get invaded? Then we'll come, then American mothers will send their sons to die for Turkey, right? And we just that's just the expectation. We do that, and it could have been them, and they're going to say, oh no, yes, we want you to defend us, but we're not going to do anything. Not that they're literally saying that, but that would be a pretty hypocritical, kind of stand. Which is the problem with this sort of arrangement in general. We're not being invaded, and we're expected to provide significant defense for these places because Russia has been historically an issue, and we don't. It is bad for us. It's bad for entire global stability if Russia invades any country. So NATO should serve the purpose of disincentivizing Russia from invading. So, right, does Finland joining NATO make an invasion by Russia more or less likely is what we should be thinking through. Right. We can say they're not going to join NATO, but you can't. If not joining NATO convinces Russia not to invade, then great. That's the goal. The goal is just to get Russia not to invade places, us not invade places, not have wars over these things. So if we can accomplish that by not having the countries in NATO, that's absolutely fine. If adding them increases the risk of some kind of war, then it's totally backfiring. So that it doesn't. It's not that NATO is this great thing, and we need everybody to be in NATO. We need to stop wars from happening. So it's only working if it's serving that purpose.
I'd be interested to see how France feels about Sweden and Finland joining NATO, because we have to remember that NATO is really a U.S.-backed military alliance. We do most of the spending. We are responsible for most of the defense. But alongside the United States, you do have the UK with their Navy. You have France, which is also one of the bigger military players, and Turkey. It's really the four countries. And the others are really benefiting from the military might of those four other countries, of Turkey, France, United States, and the UK. So it'll be interesting to see how France feels about it. France has been actually actively trying to negotiate things with Ukraine and Russia to try to ease the tensions. Macron has been now called a Putin puppet because he does regular phone calls with Putin to try to get some negotiation going. I'm sure Turkey is doing something very, very similar. Luckily, these two very large military countries are actually trying to actively advocate for more peace, and they're trying to tone things down. So I'm curious to see how France feels about whether or not Finland and Sweden can join the NATO alliance. Because again, Finland doesn't have a lot of people, so it's not like their military can be all that big and robust. So it's really up to these other countries that are providing more of the military might to step in and potentially defend Finland against Russia if Russia were to invade. So, there's a lot of, it's not just, a country's joining and it's strengthening. A lot of times that country, when it joins, takes away more than it strengthens. Like Montenegro, I keep bringing them up. I'm sorry, Montenegro, but, does anybody know where it is on a map? Why are they NATO? Why are they in NATO? Do we really think Montenegro is going to come to the defense of the United States? I mean, I'm sure they would. They'd send some soldiers, but how many do they have? Right. The place is tiny. So, there's a lot of questions that go into these NATO, into adding countries into the NATO alliance. But again, I'm curious to see if France would actually be a country that potentially blocks it as well.
Good points. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.